Hello, good evening, and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin with U.S.-China tariff war, where China has warned that it is not afraid to fight a trade war with the United States and reiterated calls for dialogue. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump said it was up to Beijing to come to the negotiating table. Foreign Ministry spokesman Li Jian urged the U.S. to stop exerting extreme pressure if they want to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiations.
在中方的立场一直很明确，关税战、贸易战没有赢家，中方不愿打，但也不怕打。如果美方真的想通过对话谈判解决问题，就应该停止极限施压那一套，停止威胁讹诈，在平等、尊重、互惠的基础上同中方对话。
Meanwhile, China is showing unexpected resilience in the face of mounting pressure from Washington. New figures reveal the world's second-largest economy is off to a stronger start than expected in 2025, despite a looming tariff storm from the United States. News Central's correspondent Ayo Ulubusi has more.
China's economy grew by 5.4% in the first quarter of 2025, beating market expectations and continuing an export-driven surge seen late last year. This is according to the country's National Bureau of Statistics, which says the economy had a steady and good start. Economists had predicted more modest growth around 5.1%, but stronger than expected. Factory output and consumer spending gave China a head start just before the full impact of President Donald Trump's harsh new tariffs kicked in. Officials admit the external environment is becoming more complex, but insist China has the strength and flexibility to weather the storm. The U.S. tariffs, aimed in part at cracking down on fentanyl, now top 145%. Exports to the U.S. are already declining, making up just 14.7% of China's total overseas sales last year, down from over 19% in 2018. China is diversifying, strengthening trade ties across Asia. In the meantime, President Xi Jinping is now on a week-long tour of Southeast Asia, pitching China as a stable global trade partner, while new leadership takes the reins in Beijing's trade ministry. But trouble may lie ahead, as economists at UBS and Goldman Sachs have downgraded China's growth forecasts, warning the tariffs could deliver a major shock to exports. The government is expected to respond with more spending and support for domestic consumption. Retail sales in March already rose nearly 6%, and industrial output jumped more than 7%. While the road ahead looks bumpy, Beijing is signaling it won't back down from its growth ambitions, determined to ride out the trade storm and keep its economy on track. For News Central, I'm Ayo Ulubusi.
In the meantime, China's President Xi Jinping has urged greater cooperation with Malaysia in the face of shocks to the global order. Xi Jinping, who made the charge during his regional tour, said that China and Malaysia will stand with countries in the region to combat the undercurrents of geopolitical and camp-based confrontation, as well as the countercurrents of unilateralism and protectionism. Xi added during a speech in Malaysia's administrative capital, Putrajaya, that they will safeguard the bright prospects of Asian family. Malaysia Premier Anwar Ibrahim said China has been a rational, strong and reliable partner amid the tariff turbulence. The World Trade Organization has said on Wednesday that the global goods trade is expected to fall by anywhere between 0.2 and 1.5% this year, and this is depending on how U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs play out. WTA Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala expressed concerns that these developments could have severe negative consequences for the global economy. She highlighted the potential for a sharper decline of up to 1.5% in trade volumes in current uncertainties That's if current uncertainties persist. The WTO also noted that a complete double coupling between the US and China could shrink global GDP by 7% in the long term, underscoring the interconnectedness of the global economy.
The trade policies currently in effect, we project, and that includes the pause, we project that global merchandise trade volumes will decline by 0.2% in 2025, nearly 3 percentage points below the level we would have expected without recent trade policy shifts. This downward revision reflects the combined impact of newly introduced tariffs and heightened uncertainty affecting trade relations with the United States. Now, a broader spread of policy uncertainty beyond U.S. trading relationships would reduce growth by another 0.7 percentage points, implying a total decline in global merchandise trade of 1.5 percentage points in 2025 if both downside risks materialize, i.e. the risk of reinstating reciprocal tariffs and also growing uncertainty spreading beyond the U.S.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has declared that the country's uranium enrichment program is non-negotiable, pushing back against U.S. calls for halt nuclear activities. Now, speaking after a cabinet meeting in Tehran, Araghchi's comments come ahead of renewed talks with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, scheduled for Saturday in Oman. The meeting follows last week's high-level dialogue, the most significant between the two nations since U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal. Tensions remain high, with Washington urging Iran to curb its enrichment activities, while Tehran insists its nuclear program is peaceful and sovereign. The upcoming talks are being closely watched for any signs of breakthrough amid years of diplomatic deadlock.
آنچه که مسلمه غنیسازی ایران یک امر واقعی پذیرفته شده و حقیقی هست و ما برای اعتمادسازی نسبت به نگرانی‌های احتمالی آمادگی داریم، ولی اصل موضوع غنیسازی قابل مذاکره است. مختلفی رو از طرف مقامات آمریکایی شنیدیم، بعضاً مواضع متضادی رو، و این اصلاً به نظر من کمک کننده به روند مناسب مذاکراتی نخواهد بود. با این حال ما باید در جلسه مذاکره مطلع بشیم از نظرات واقعی اونها. اگر که با مواضع سازنده‌ای بیایند، من امیدوار هستم که ما مذاکره در خصوص چارچوب یک توافق محتمل رو بتونیم شروع بکنیم. اگر که نه همچنان با مواضع متناقض و متضاد باشه، خب کار مشکله.
Let's talk U.S. politics, where former President Joe Biden delivered his first major public speech since leaving office, addressing a conference in Chicago on April 15, 2025. Now, in his remarks, Biden criticized the Trump administration's handling of Social Security, accusing it of endangering benefits for 73 million seniors by implementing staffing cuts and office closures within the Social Security Administration. The speech coincided with a National Social Security Day of Action, during which Democrats organized protests against proposed reductions to the program. While Biden's reemergence has been welcomed by some Democrats, others expressed concern over his return to the public sphere, fearing it could complicate the party's messaging ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Now, in the meantime, Harvard University is defying pressures from President Donald Trump as the U.S. leader escalates his battle with elite academic institutions. Trump threatened to ship Harvard off its tax-exempt status after freezing $2.2 billion in federal funding. News Central's international correspondent Afia Hagen has the story.
President Trump ramped up his fight against U.S. universities this week, targeting Harvard with a threat to revoke its tax-exempt status unless the school submits to sweeping government oversight. It follows the freezing of billions in research funds, moves the White House says are aimed at cracking down on anti-Semitism and political bias. Harvard's president, Alan Garber, pushed back, saying the school will not negotiate over its independence or its constitutional rights. The standoff comes as pressure mounts on institutions across the country, some of which, like Columbia University, have agreed to federal oversight of academic departments. Trump's team justifies the crackdown as necessary to root out alleged anti-Semitism on campus, citing protests over the Gaza war. He also says he wants Harvard to apologise for what his administration insists is the university's tolerance of anti-Semitism.
First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students.
But critics say the measures are politically motivated and an attack on academic freedom. Former President Barack Obama backed Harvard's stance, calling it a line in the sand against authoritarian overreach. Meanwhile, legal battles are intensifying, with dozens of institutions challenging sweeping cuts to research funding. With Harvard refusing to yield and the White House doubling down, the clash between academia and executive power is only heating up. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
Now, still in North America, the North American region, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum on Wednesday said that Mexico would not renew diplomatic relations with Ecuador as long as Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa remains in office. Now, the rift is a result of Ecuador's raid on the Mexican embassy in Quito in April of 2024, after which Mexico recalled its diplomats from the South American country. Former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass, accused of graft, has been living in the Mexican embassy since December of 2023 and received diplomatic asylum shortly before Ecuadorian police stormed the embassy and took him into custody. Now we go on a short break, and when we come back, UK top court rules definition of woman as based on sex at birth. When we return. Welcome back. Now, Britain's Supreme Court said the legal definition of a woman is based on a person's sex at birth, a landmark ruling with far-reaching implications to the bitter debate over trans rights. In a win for Scottish gender-critical campaigners who brought the case to the UK's highest court, 5 London judges unanimously ruled the term woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 referred to a biological woman and biological sex. The court added that the act also protected transgender people against discrimination.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not. In our view, the absence of coherence within the statute and the practical problems which arise demonstrate that that interpretation is not correct. It follows that the interpretation of woman in the Scottish Government guidance on the 2018 Act is incorrect, and the challenge to that guidance succeeds. Further, the principle of discrimination by association remains part of our law, see Section 19A of the EA, and protects transgender people against indirect discrimination, regardless of whether they possess gender recognition certificates. A certified sex reading is not required to achieve any relevant purpose in relation to indirect discrimination. For these reasons, the court allows the appeal.
Now, meanwhile, campaigners celebrate outside the United Kingdom Supreme Court in London as the top court rules on the definition of a woman as based on sex at birth. This is described as a landmark decision with far-reaching implications for the bitter debate over trans rights.
We had no idea. We went in there completely cold. We were shaking. We were really scared. But that was a brilliant ruling. It set out very clearly why the law has to be clear and consistent, and went through all of our points. And it's not just about women's spaces, it's also about protecting groups like gay men and lesbians, because they have to be able to define their sexuality. And of course, if you can't define sex, you can't define sexuality. So it's a victory for them as well.
It should be important to absolutely everyone, whether or not we can describe fundamental reality, whether we recognise fundamental reality as a society, or whether we base our governance on ideology, is important to every single aspect of life, but particularly for women, when our rights and protections are based on our sex, whether it's a female toilet, girls' changing rooms, sports teams, prison.
Away from that now, Pope Francis met with around 70 people during an audience at the Vatican, including medical staff who treated him for double pneumonia at Rome's Gemelli Hospital. After being admitted on February 14th, the 88-year-old pontiff spent nearly 40 days in hospital and was advised to spend at least 2 months recovering. The week of Easter is the most significant religious holiday in the Christian calendar and is packed with events from the Way of the Cross celebrated at the Colosseum to the Easter Vigil liturgy. But less than a month after his release from Rome's Gemelli Hospital, where he spent nearly 40 days, Francis is likely to sit out the bulk of the week's events for the first time since being made Pope in 2013.
Grazie e grazie per tutto quello che avete fatto. Grazie a lei, sei così forte. Quando comandano le donne, le cose vanno. Grazie e grazie a tutti voi. Prego per voi, per favore fatelo per me. Grazie.
Now, former governor of Russia's Kursk region and his ex-deputy have been arrested on suspicion of embezzling over $12 million of funds earmarked for border defense with Ukraine. Alexei Simonov and Alexei Dadov were in charge of the region when Ukrainian troops stormed across the border in August 2024, mounting the biggest ground assault on Russian territory since World War II. The two were detained as part of a criminal investigation into the embezzlement of budget funds totaling more than $12 million. The funds were allocated to a local state-backed developer for the construction of fortifications on the region's border with Ukraine. Over 100 people lay on the steps of the Opera Bastille in central Paris to protect against the death of nearly 200 Palestinian journalists in 18 months. And this is a protest in military operations carried out by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip. The journalist is one of
محمد الثلاثيني يزن الزويد محمد عبد الفتاح عطلة رزق الغرابلي ياسر ممدوح نافذ عبد الجواد آلاء الهم.
Israeli forces have killed 2 Palestinians during a raid in Misliya near Jabatia in the northern West Bank. The Israeli military stated that one of the individuals was a suspect involved in a January attack that resulted in Israeli casualties. The raid targeted a residence, leading to an exchange of gunfire during which both individuals were fatally shot. The Israeli army reported seizing weapons and dismantling bomb-making facilities at the scene.
اللي صار احنا شغالين هون بالمنشار هون ما سينا الا الجيش اجوا هون على المنطقه طوقوا المنطقه كلها وطبعا خلونا نطفي نوقف عن الشغل يعني شايف، وبكت كل المنطقة هاي محاصرة، وبلشوا يضربوا صواريخ انيرجا وطخ وهيك، ما نعرف شو فيه. بعدين اجوا جابوا جرافة كبيرة وكحفت تحت الارض، طالت هذا الكونتينر او اللي شيء.
حمدت الله، قلت الحمد لله رب العالمين. يعني هذا الشيء هو اللي كان يدور عليه وطلبه، ان شاء الله انه ربنا بيتقبله منه. يعني حاله حال الشباب وحاله حال الناس، ان شاء الله عملوا خالص وجه الله تعالى وربنا بيتقبل منه.
كل يوم يعني على الدار بكو يجوا، كل يوم عنا وعند اخوتي وعلى دارنا وعلى الحاره، يعني صعب علينا كل، والحمد لله ثبتنا والحمد لله رب العالمين. آلاف الشهداء كل يوم تسكت، الحمد لله ابني اللي الله شرفنا وانه ابني شهيد، الحمد لله.
India's main opposition Congress party on Wednesday accused the government of a vendetta after a federal agency filed charges against its top leaders in a years-long corruption case. Congress party leader Rahul Gandhi and his mother Sonia Gandhi were charged as part of a probe initiated by a member of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party. They have denied the allegations and have accused the BJP of using the state apparatus to target its rivals. Congress lawmaker Abhishek Singhivi said the case was nothing but vendetta in legal disguise. He also accused the government of using the Enforcement Directorate of selectively targeting the opposition while sparing its allies. And that's all on Beyond the Continent today. Now, do remember that you may send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on your screens now. And follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You may also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, StarTimes channel 274, Able TV, and of course on YouTube. Now, many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.